Guess the answer is yes.
I mean, I would have just brought it home and had it.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
1 minute to 12, and we are going to be starting our Talmud class. So hi, everybody. I know everybody in the room, but I don't think you all know each other, so people in the room say hi and give your name. We'll start with you,
My
Ira.
name is Ira Jacobs.
Bonnie Smiler,
Hi, Becca Cosson.
Hilda Pressman.
Arthur Gordon. Harvard Lasky.
Everybody, yes?
Okay, everybody, and welcome. We have more seats in the room for people who will be late arrivals. Hilda, this is for you. This is today's text. The photocopying from my office was done by Debbie Robinson. We should all thank her for her many ways that she supports my work in our synagogue. In this case, the booklet she put together looks like it's reading from left to right, as opposed to right to left. So purists, I apologize, but we'll run it in that way. For those online or who are doing this as a review of a later on, if you're going back and watching this video, we will be starting at 12 o'clock sharp every Monday except the Monday during Pesach when we will not have class from now until Shavuot, which is the end of May. So we'll go through the first 2 weeks of May. That gives us about 7 or 8 weeks classes together. We're going to try and do chapter 2 of Chagiga. I've put a link into the chat box online. If you click on that link, it will take you right to the English Hebrew of chapter 2 of Chagiga. So this is the fruition of 2 previous Talmud classes that we attempted here with nice support. We did an evening, we did an afternoon, we saw who came to what, how many more people came to which, and if people were interested in studying Talmud together, we got a positive response, and by the 7 people in the room, and we'll see how many online over time, it looks like it's worthwhile. So we're going to do Chagiga. What is Chagiga? Chagiga is a Hebrew word, which it's actually Aramaic of a Hebrew word from chogeg, which means to, as Seinfeld might say, to festivus, or to festivate. It means to have a feast. And it also has a secondary meaning, which means to make pilgrimage. And as we pointed out when we did the first Mishnah of this in the Talmud class a couple months ago, the word chogeg is related to the Arabic word hajj, which is, of course, in Islam, the pilgrimage to Mecca. And we have, of course, a long history of pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot are the holidays when we had to make pilgrimage to Jerusalem. We did not need, hi Stan, we did not need to make, why don't we put you right here? Hi. Here's an extra copy.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. We did not need to make pilgrimage on Rosh Hashanah. We did not need to make pilgrimage on Yom Kippur. Those weren't pilgrimage holidays. So the command for a pilgrimage holiday had a couple of things that were unique. One, it said, Kol zechorecha lo yirei rekam. All of your males need to appear in Jerusalem, and they can't appear empty-handed. So they were forced or commanded to make pilgrimage, to show up during the holiday at some point. They didn't need to be there for the whole holiday, and to bring an offering. And so there were 2 offerings commanded. One is the olah for the holiday itself, which is a burnt offering. If you come to shul this week, in any synagogue in the world, you will see that we are beginning the book of Leviticus, the book of Vayikra, and the first several chapters of Vayikra tells you exactly what the sacrifices were that were done routinely in the temple. The olah, the asham, the chatat, the shlamim, all of the different sacrifices and what they were attached to. One might be for celebration, one might be repair of a sin, one might be because of a holiday, one might be because of the fulfillment of a vow. There were a lot of ways that you would be obligated to bring a sacrifice, and bringing that sacrifice was part of your expression of your Jewishness, but it was also a way to make sure that your life was moving on. You have a peak event, you celebrate it. You have a low in your life, you mark it and move on. The sacrificial system, psychologically, was a way of naming and bringing closure to disruptive events in our lives, which we do with life cycle events and things now. You know, you have a wedding with a big ceremony, it's a life cycle event. Or somebody, has a trial and goes to jail and they come out. In the biblical world, the person doesn't just slink out of jail, get on a bus and try and pretend it didn't happen, and only reveal that when necessary because there's still a stigma against them in society as a convict. In the biblical world, that person would have gone to the temple in front of everybody and offered the sacrifice and then come to closure, been forgiven of that deed. Yeah.
If you had a problem, could you make a sacrifice to try to influence the outcome?
So it's the question, and I'll repeat questions for the people online because I don't know if the microphone will pick you up. The question is, if you have a problem, can you do a sacrifice to kind of avoid the problem, fix the problem, restore the problem without other consequence, or without
Influence the outcome.
to influence the outcome of the problem? So the fact is that whereas I would like to say no, you can't be evasive or irresponsible, you have to take your just desserts. The truth is the sacrificial system is meant to mitigate punishment and to solve problems. And the language of that is leratzot, which means to appease God or to gain God's ratzon, to gain God's will and desire towards you. So if you do bad things, you're kind of cutting off God from you. God may turn his face, God forbid, from you, and the relationship is broken. And when you bring this sacrifice, when you do these acts, you are actually in some ways repairing that relationship and asking him to turn back towards you, to turn his face towards you willfully and lovingly to reestablish those bonds. So as long as there's no chicanery in the offer, right, you're doing it because you need to repair, you recognize what you've done, then yes, it does do that. And the sacrifices also gain kapara, right? Like Yom Kippur, they gain atonement. So there is the possibility in many cases where by naming, acknowledging, and offering, you avoid other negative outcomes. You gain atonement, you gain forgiveness, rather than getting excommunication or the other things that happen biblically.
Well, actually, any mitzvah will bring you closer to God, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be that.
Correct. And we're going to see in the Talmud, hi Debbie, thank you. We're going to see in the Talmud this concept of mitzvot having multiple meanings and multiple effects and all that kind of thing. Okay, so we're going to dive in. For those of you who were here in my previous Talmud class, we're going to do very quickly what's called chazarah, a repeat, a review of the last class. It's going to take me about 5 to 10 minutes of this class to do that. You may recall that class was an hour and a half long. So we're going to do that hour and a half of materials in the next 5 to 10 minutes to give us a running start so that we understand where the Talmud is picking up. I'm not going to be defining terms like Talmud, Gemara, Mishnah, Baraita, and so forth. If those words come up and you don't know what it is, don't be shy. Habayshan lo lamed. A shy person can't learn. You have to be willing to say, I don't know. Every question you're asking is a question that I asked when I started, because I started this whole process in my life knowing not even Aleph Bet. So, whatever question you have is a question that I asked once or I was once too shy to ask. So there's no bad question at any point. If I say a word and you don't know it, I'll help you out. Okay, here we go. So Ein Dorshin, chapter 2 of Chagiga, begins with a fascinating Mishnah, which is the basis of much speculation. The Mishnah talks about what you are allowed to and not allowed to teach in public. And the question is, how public is public? So you have in your packets, you have an English translation on page 1. If you open it up to the third page, you'll see the Hebrew of it, which is actually not... We're on page 11b, chapter 2, Mishnah, the subject of forbidden relations. So hold it like an English book, and on the front you see chapter 2. The translation is from Sansino, an oldie but a goodie. And let me just see if the Hebrew is running equally. It's not. The first page of the Hebrew has not been copied for you. I apologize. The actual Hebrew page, Ein Dorshin, is not there. It starts on 12a instead of 11b. So you have to just trust me on the Hebrew. Okay? So it goes like this: Ein dorshim ba'ariyot b'shlosha v'lo b'ma'aseh b'reishit b'shnayim v'lo b'merkava b'yachid ela im kein hayachacham u'mevi dato. So you're not allowed to explore or teach the laws of sexual prohibitions. That means which members of the family and so forth that you're forbidden from being intimate with three people. You're not allowed to teach Maaseh Breshit, creation, with two people, and you're not allowed to teach Maaseh Merkavah, the chariot, which is the vision in Ezekiel of the chariot in the heaven, which comes to mean metaphysics or the theology of God, the existence of God, the reality of the heavenly realms, that kind of thing, with one, unless the person is wise and understands of their own. So that's the Mishnah. Mishnah is terse and always needs to be explained. So there's a prohibition of teaching sexual prohibitions with three, creation with two, or divine matters with one. The Gemara, the Talmud, which is the study of Mishnah, immediately comes in and, the Mishnah goes on. We're going to do the Sefer, the Mishnah. Any person who examines three different things, it would be better that he never existed. So this is a serious statement. And what are the things? Ma lamala, ma lamata, what is above, what is below, ma lifanim, ma leachor, what is before and what is after. V'chol shelo chas al kavod kono, and anybody who's not concerned with the kavod of his creator, ra'ui lo shelo ba'al olam, also should never have been created. So this is a very strong passage. It has prohibition against certain areas that are in the Torah, which we're not supposed to explain publicly, and then it has this concept that, and if you don't have reverence and deference to God, you're really, in their minds, and we explore this in the Talmud class, does this mean you're a waste of a human life, worst case scenario, or is this that you will just be so unhappy in your life that it's better for you that you don't make yourself so miserable? Those were the two interpretations of that we had in our last Talmud class. Okay. The Talmud immediately looks at something like this and says, what do you mean? How can you not study about these things? They're in the Torah. How much secret can they be? And what does it mean you can't study with three? Does that include the teacher? Right? And what does it mean only if the person was wise and could understand it his own? In that case, why are you studying with them? Right? So how do you ever engage in a classroom of people in these cases? That'll be the concern of the Mishnah. Now, it went very quickly. The Gemara said in the beginning, I'm working from a slightly different translation. So you're at 11b on the left under the Mishnah, Gemara. Okay? You say in the beginning, Lo b'merkava b'yachid. You can't do a merkava with one person. V'hadar v'amarta, and later you returned and said, Ela im kem hayachacham mevin midato, unless he is wise and understands from himself, which makes no sense. You can't study with one, even if it is a person who is. Which is it? And who's that referring to? The wise person. Is that the teacher or is that the student? Hachi kamar. This is what it's saying. Ein dorshim ba'ariyot b'shlosha lishlosha. So they're going to change it in the Gemara. They're going to not say you're forbidden from studying with three people, but you're studying for three people, which makes it the teacher plus three as opposed to the teacher one of three. That's what they do at first. You can't expound on 2-3 people. And v'lo b'maseh breshit li shnayim. You can't do creation two students. V'lo b'merkava li yachid, to one. Ela im kem hayachacham mevin midato, unless that person, the teacher, is a scholar who understands completely, and then he's allowed to teach. So they've changed it completely in the first teaching of the Talmud. The first Gemara teaching kind of flips the whole Mishnah on its head. It expands it, and it makes the teacher the chacham. Now, it goes on. Ein dorshin ba'arayot b'shlosha. You can't expound you can't expound the idea of forbidden sexual relationships with three. My Talmud. It's going to ask a question. What is the reason? Talmud always wants to say, what's the Torah verse? If I'm going to teach you something, I'm going to say it's forbidden, I have to back it up. I can't just say it, supposedly. So they're going to say, my Talmud, what's the reason? Now we're going to get into a little cutesy stuff here, which we did in the last class, and we're not going to get bogged down. I'm about to do a verse that goes ish, and I'm going to do a verse that says ushamartem. there's going to be multiple examples of ish, and then it's going to get discarded. Multiple examples of shmartem, and it's going to get discarded. And I'm about to do that. But I'm warning you, don't get bogged down. This piece of it is going to be a whirlwind. It's going to spin your head around, but the idea is there's an exit ramp off each of them, and we're never coming back to them. So we're going to just kind of move through and get a sense of the sing-song, and then we're going to get on to today's topic. Okay? So, my Tama, what's the reason? What's the reason for the prohibition against expounding on forbidden relationships with three people? Ilema mishum dichtiv, if you're going to say because of it's the verse, ish el kol sa'ar b'saro, in Leviticus on the prohibition of these forbidden sexual relationships, there's a verse that says, ish, any man who approaches his close relatives, sa'ar b'saro, somebody who is his own flesh, to reveal nakedness and so forth, mot yumat, he should be killed. And then it says, how are we going to make that 3? Ish is 2. Sa'ar b'saro, his flesh, is 3. So it says, ish b'saro. You're going to say the first ish is 1, the second ish is 2. B'saro, his flesh, is a 3rd, and therefore you have a prohibition about the sexual things associated with 3 people. Is that what the verse means? No. They're engaged in what's called midrash halacha. They're finding a verse, they're interpreting it to apply to the law. Normally, you start with the verse and result in the halacha, the law, no matter what you think about it. This is backwards. This is why it's not going to work. They're starting with a halacha, and then they're trying to force it into the verse. Right? And they already know that it's not going to be the verse because they started with ilema. If you were to say that it is based on this verse, that's already a setup. Right? Dad, can I go over to my friend's house? If I were to let you go to your friend's house, this isn't going to turn out well, is it? Right? Same thing in the Talmud sing song. Okay, so Ve'amar Rachmana lo tikravu legalot erva. And it says, thank you, the merciful one said, do not approach to reveal the nakedness of your person. Ela me'ata dichtiv. Rather, if we say that the ish says you shouldn't reveal nakedness, well, what are you going to do with this? And I'm going to tell you other places in the Torah that say ish. And remember, they said ish is 3 people. So technically then, anywhere else in the Torah where it's ish, the prohibition would apply to 3 people. Let's see if that works. Ela me'ata dichtiv, but now if we apply that to that which is written, ish ki yikalel Elohav, a man, if he blasphemes God, mot yumat, he should also be killed. Then what's the conclusion? Blasphemers are only breaking laws if there's 3 of them. And we know that's not the case. One guy breaks this law, he gets executed. We have that in the Torah more than once. And ish asher yiten mizara lemolech. And what about where it says, a man who gives his child to the pagan god Molech, which some people believe is a child sacrifice ritual that's forbidden. Other people think it's a fire ritual that's forbidden. Whatever it is, it's forbidden. It's really bad. It's got a death penalty. If you say ish means 3, then you're saying that 2 people are allowed to do that, which is ludicrous. You would never allow that. Hachinami, you would have to say this also in that case. So now, typical Talmudic style, the rhetorical question wins. So Talmud will often draw a conclusion with a rhetorical statement. If you were to say ish there, then ish with blasphemy and ish with child sacrifice would also be the case. And if you're only thinking logically, you would say, okay, so that's the case. But they're presuming that's not acceptable, and so they say it would also be, and obviously that's ludicrous, is not written in the text, but now they're going to move on. Okay? So, Ella, now that we know it's not that verse, the editor of the Talmud comes in and he throws another verse at you to play with, and that's the shmartim that I told you about. Elahan hu mibai lerabot et hanecharim. So why would you have ish in those cases if it doesn't mean 3? It's to include Gentiles, foreigners, in the prohibition. So if ish doesn't mean 3, it needs to mean something. So to prove it doesn't mean 3, the Talmud is going to tell you what it means. Get it?
Sure.
Now, I call this a game of bridge or spades. Any card game with trump. I have to use the word trump. I'm sorry he's the president. But this is the analogy that works. So you have trump cards, okay? And spades beats diamonds. So and you can only play each card once. Okay? So if I've got a Torah verse, that's like playing a card that's winning. But if I can take that card away because it means something else, then you can't play that card there, and my card will win the hand. So you're playing a trump card, you're playing a Torah verse. The only way for me to beat that, since I can't beat it with trump, because Torah verses are already trump, I have to take that card away from you. I say, you can't play the Jack of Spades here. That Jack of Spades is already been played on another hand somewhere, and that other hand is this meaning I'm about to tell you. And since it was already used for that meaning, you can't use it for this meaning. Torah verses are like cards in a round of bridge. You can only play them once. You can't play the same card over and over again. Right? Wouldn't it be great? You could play the Ace of Spades on every hand. It's a really boring game. Right? So the Torah verses get so the Torah verses get taken away from each other on a regular basis. So that's what's going to happen here. We're going to say mi ba'ilei l'rabot et ha'nachomim. We needed ish there to include the Jew and the non-Jew. That's the ish and the ish who's forbidden with blasphemy. Shemuzarim al birkat Hashem ve'al avodat zara ki Yisrael. They are forewarned against, and there's a really interesting Talmudic cultural thing here. Well, you don't have the Hebrew in front of you, but it's birkat Hashem. They're warned against blessing God. Really? No. The Talmud doesn't want to say the words cursing God. So they're warned against blessing God. Right? It's sagi tahor. It's using pure language to talk about something that's not pure. Right? So that happens a lot in the Talmud, especially when you're saying something that would be offensive to God. You'll substitute the perfect, beautiful opposite, and everyone knows what you're talking about. Notice how Talmud is presuming knowledge. Right? By saying, well, if you did that, then idolatry would be only prohibited for 3. It's presuming you know that's an unacceptable outcome. It doesn't say that. Here, it's going to say, well, it's to warn them against blessing God. It's going to presume that you know that they couldn't possibly be warned against blessing God. We love that non-Jews bless God. Non-Jews were allowed to bring sacrifices in the ancient temple. They could bring a sacrifice into the temple and offer it. That was permitted. Right? It wasn't a Jew-only place. Right? The second temple was actually built under the command of Cyrus of Persia for the purpose of offering sacrifices for his well-being. That's what the book Chronicles tells us was his motivation. And he says, you go and you're going to make sacrifices there for me. And they say, okay. And they go and they build the second temple. So that's not what it is. Blessing means cursing here. V'hachinami bibai le'lerabot et ha'nechemim, and regarding the molech thing, shemus harim al ha'arayot ki Yisrael, and so the ish here is in the forbidden sexual relations also going to be to bring in the Gentiles, that they're also not allowed to do these forbidden sexual liaisons, just like we're not. So I've taken the verses away from the person who said that's why we don't allow 3 to be taught. Now I have a problem, because the Talmud started with the question, on what basis do you have the chutzpah to teach a halacha that's not in the Torah? You're teaching a law that you can't teach these things among 3 people. I don't see it in the Torah. Where are these words from? You offered one verse. I've completely beaten you back. That verse is unacceptable. So the Gemara is going to try another. Ella midichtiv. Rather, it's because it says, Ushamartem et mishmarti. You shall observe my safeguards. Ushamartem, and you, plural, will observe, is at least 2 people, otherwise it wouldn't be plural. Et mishmarti, my guardings, my safeguards, which is also associated with the sexual things. You have to guard my safeguards from doing these horrific things. So you, plural, shall guard against my safeguard. It's 2 people plus 1 is going to be 3. Is this good logic? No, this is not. The Talmud is having fun. This is what the editor of the Talmud considers to be fun. He's going to play with verses and see if it works. And he's going to have the same structure of how to reject it that he did with ish. So he's going to say, V'amar Rachmana, and God said, Levilti asot mechukot hatoevot. So it's Ushamartem et mishmarti, Levilti asot mechukot hatoevot, and you shall guard my safeguards so that you shall not do these abhorrent things. That's the translation there. By the way, I know that among the list of sexual prohibitions there are modern arguments and interpretations. I just want to let you know that that's not the Talmud's agenda, and this is Talmud class. If you want to talk with me about modern applications of the halakha, I think that you may be happily reassured of the freedom of my interpretations and my social halakha, but I'm just going to be in Talmud language here. So don't try and learn Rabbi Tobin's modern halakha based on what we're doing in the Talmud. We're taking it on its own terms. Hamevin Yavin? People who understand? Good. Don't cause me trouble. Okay, so when we use the word toevot, abominable practices, the Torah is saying guard against my guarding, and the Talmud is saying guard is plural, 2, my guarding is 1, 2 plus 1 is 3, against my abominable practices is sexual relationships, therefore that's the prohibition against 3 with sexual relationships. You with me? How we doing? Right? It's like it's like a bobsled run, right? You fly through the turns and then you hope you come out on top at the end. Okay, but now, so Ella me'ata dichtiv. Now, however, the objection comes ushmartem et Shabbat. So you're going to say every time it's ushmartem mishmarti, you're going to say that's a prohibition of 3. So what am I going to do? I'm going to find places where it says that, where that would be ludicrous. So one of the places it says that is not breaking Shabbos. So you're going to say people can break Shabbos in groups of 2? It's only if there's 3 people that you have Shabbos rules?
Sounds good to me.
It destroys the entire system. So, ushamartem et ha-mitzvot, et ha-matzot. Ushamartem et ha-matzot, ushamartem et ha-mishmeret ha-kodesh. So we have 3 examples. Ushamartem Shabbat, ushamartem matzot on Pesach, ushamartem mishmeret ha-kodesh, and you shall observe the whole holiness ritual in the temple. So all of those only apply to less than 3 people. Give me a break. So that's all been solved. So the problem is we don't have a verse. So what are you going to do? The Talmud and the rabbinic system is based on the idea that all halacha is based on the Torah. We don't get to just make things up. But the Mishnah gives itself more permission than that. The Mishnah is a law code based on precedent law in the 1st and 2nd century of the Common Era in the land of Israel. The rabbis who wrote the Mishnah didn't have to worry about Talmud, and they didn't have to worry about the Shulchan Aruch, and they didn't have to worry about Rashi. All these things come later. They were just studying and writing down the conclusions of their work. And so the Mishnah often is actually creative law, or in constitutional debates these days, you would call it legislating from the bench. Right? So do you have a strict constitutionalist approach to Jewish law, that it has to be in the Torah for you to make a law for the judges of the Mishnah? Or do the judges of the Mishnah get to say, we know the Torah, we live the Torah, we are the Torah, and therefore what we do and say is also Torah? And it's pretty clear that the rabbis of the Mishnah are in that second category. The rabbis of the Talmud do not give themselves that freedom of empowerment, and so they don't project it back on the Mishnah either. And they really need to find on what basis the Mishnah arrogated to itself that authority. Right? They don't want the Mishnah to arrogate authority. They want to say that it is actually firmly based in the ultimate authority, which is only God and Torah. That's the Talmud's concern. So that's what we're doing. So now we haven't done it. So now we go, Ella Amar Ravashi. So rather, Ravashi says, "My ein dorshim ba'aryeh pishlosha." By the way, in the history of the levels of the Talmud starts in the year 200 and goes to about 550, 600. In those 400 years of study, a lot of ink gets spilt in a lot of different study houses, and it's only the editors at the end of that process that put it all together in this order. And very often one paragraph will be followed by a paragraph that happened earlier, because the editors are putting things in logical order rather than chronological order. Okay, so what we just read is probably the last layer of the editor playing with something that has nothing to do with the earliest level of the Talmud study of Mishnah. Rav Ashi is earlier than that. So now we're going into Rav Ashi, which means Rav Ashi probably was the original response to the Mishnah, and this is where the real study begins. What we just did was the editor having fun.
Who gave these individuals, or on what basis did these individuals become the ones to write it down?
Which, Mishnah or Talmud?
Either.
So Mishnah, the rabbis were authorized under the Nasi. There was a political religious leadership authorized by Rome in the northern part of Israel. in the 2nd century, and they had positive relationships with the powers that be. They were also the Sanhedrin. They were the inheritors of the system of Torah study and biblical interpretation authority that goes back to the temple times, where they were ruling on matters of Jewish law in Jerusalem, in the courts, and in all the local towns. So you have an authority of rabbinic study pairs and Sanhedrin and judges and all this that has an unbroken chain of tradition all the way back to Joshua, Moses, and Sinai. They're the inheritors of that tradition. That's the internal authority. They're also appointed and recognized as the religious authority for the courts of law in northern Israel under Rome at this time. That's the secular political authority. So they have genuine authority when they write the Mishnah. The Mishnah is then carried by a guy named Ula around the year 200, we have the exact date, to Babylonia. And it becomes the core study text for the great academies of Surah, Pumbedita, and others in modern-day Iraq. Over the next 100 to 200 years, the Jewish population in Israel is devastated. There's a cataclysmic earthquake in the north that destroys almost every standing city. Sepphoris, Beit Sha'an, for example, if you go, the archaeology in Beit Sha'an is spectacular. Roman city, Goyish city completely, Dionysus temples and everything else, but it falls and doesn't get rebuilt. Tzipori, right, up north, where the rabbis are living with Romans and writing the Mishnah, is also destroyed at that time and not rebuilt. And you have more synagogues that are kind of rebuilt around the hillsides, but things get bad. At the same time, the Roman Empire in that area is starting to become less prosperous. And basically, long story short, by the year 400, you don't have many Jews living, and they're not powerful, and they're not prosperous, and they're not creating literature. In the north of Israel, the Palestinian Talmud comes to a close. The Babylonian Talmud keeps going. By the year 600, by the year 700, over 90% of the Jews on the face of the planet are living in Babylonia, within a day's walk of Surah and Pumbedita. Judaism is a Babylonian sieve, right? We have ancient history and everything else that is where we come from and who we are, but it moves through the funnel of Babylonia like Eastern Europe moves through the funnel of the Pale. Right? It's a time of a concentration. That concentration results in Talmud. And then when that community starts to fall apart, Talmud is taken with them to the rest of the Jewish world, just like Mishnah was taken from Israel to Babylonia. Talmud is what is exported, and it becomes the basis of all Judaism from that time forward.
What do you mean by compose the Mishnah?
So
what exactly you mean by that?
So there's obviously a theology of rabbinic text that says everything was revealed at Sinai to Moses in the study house with God, and that he brought it all down, and Mishnah remained secret until it was put into writing for the historical necessities that I explained. I don't hold that theology of Mishnah because the rabbis themselves don't say that about Mishnah. They say that about a thing called Torah. In the beginning of Pirkei Avot, it says, God gave Torah to Moses at Sinai, and Moses passed it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, and it goes on down the chain of unbroken tradition. The question is, what is Torah? So is Torah their oral instruction, or is it the written Torah, or is it both? And I think it's both, but I don't think it's every jot and jittle of the Mishnah as we've received it, because we have other books from the time of the Mishnah, like the Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael and the Tosefta and the Sifrei, which are from the same time periods with alternate and parallel versions of the writings. It seems clear that there was a heavy editorial process going on with these teachings to put them in the form that we have in the Mishnah. Now, does that mean the teachings were novel? I can't answer that. The teachings may be divine, but the form of the sentences, the choice of this word and this syntax and this structure, that to me is a clear human editorial hand under the leadership of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi at the end of the 2nd century of the Common Era. The Talmud is clearly human creation, and one of the main activities of the Talmud, which we'll see right now, isn't just what, like Rav Ashi comes in and has a teaching, that may be an ancient teaching that he's presenting, or maybe his original teaching. I don't spend a lot of time losing sleep over that, because I have it here and I like it, and it doesn't matter where he got it. It comes in his name. But then they're going to quote a Baraita, and we're going to see in this chapter several instances of Baraitot, which are Tanaitic age, Mishnah age teachings that aren't in the Mishnah, or that slightly change the wording of the Mishnah, and the rabbis of the Talmud had them. So they go onto the library shelf and they go, here's Rabbi Yehuda Nassi's Mishnah, here's a Baraita, here's something from the Tosefta, and they've got the variant forms. And to solve problems, they're willing to go to the other version and say, that's actually the version, not the Mishnah, to better understand the Mishnah. Ultimately, the Mishnah wins always. But they have this dynamic literature of variation from the 2nd century. That's the essence of Talmudic sing-song, is to bring these alternate texts and try and figure out. Now remember, the whole point of Talmud isn't entertainment. It's to find out what God wants from you. Right? We're engaging God. We study Mishnah to understand what does God want us to do, and we study Talmud to understand what is the Mishnah trying to tell us. Right? That's the purpose of Talmud. A lot of other stuff comes into the buffet as we sample things along the way. Like this tractate, which has nothing to do with Chagiga. Right? 2nd chapter of Chagiga, we're not talking about a sacrifice. Right? We're talking about something else. They'll come in. All right? Did I intuit what you were really asking?
Yes,
And did I answer what you were asking?
reasonably.
Okay. I know I didn't, I know, I sense in question, sometimes you get a question that's a known question, and I'll sense in it that the starting point of that question is also a conclusion. And if it's a conclusion that I don't agree with, I'll be honest about that and recognize the differences and the validity, and that it is sometimes a choice. Is that fair? All right, good. In full disclosure, if there's a stranger online watching this at any point, I am a traditionalist, historically based, philosophical, theological, conservative Jew. So that some people may have just clicked off YouTube right there. Oh, he's a conservative Jew. But I'm very textual and very historical and love Torah study as my expression of Judaism. So that's why I do what I do. Okay, here we go. Rav Ashi. So what does Rav Ashi do? My ein dorshim ba'arayot b'shlosha. He says, why can't you do, and he quotes the Mishnah, teach forbidden sexual unions among 3. Ein dorshim b'sitrei arayot b'shlosha. He says, actually it means you can't teach the secrets, all the little details of that stuff. Like it says, you shall not sleep with an animal. Do you really want me to go into the details from the pulpit on Saturday morning with 150 people, men, women, and children in the room? Right? Maybe that's not what I should be doing. Everyone agree?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Right? So the details shouldn't be done. My tama. And then he has a different reason. What's the reason he says? Savarahu. It's logical. Now Rav Ashi is, to use the phrase I used, arrogating to himself the explanation of the reason of this law. This is a logical necessity to implement this law. Savarahu. He's not going to bring you a Torah verse. He's going to bring you a human, logical reality that is compelling. Okay? There's a later tradition in the halacha, in the Shulchan Aruch, and in the Ramah, the Ashkenaz gloss on the medieval text of halacha, that says you cannot teach an unknown halacha unless you are a Rav Ashi in your generation. Rav Ashi was one of the only ones who's allowed to do this. So the fact that he's brought in to solve the absence of a biblical verse is not accidental. Right? He's one of the only ones who the Talmud sees as doing this. My Thomas, so what's the reason? Ki bitrei ki yatve kame rabbiho. When 2 people sit with their rabbi, chad shakil v'tari v'hade rabbe. They are, one is conversing back and forth with the rabbi, and the other is paying attention, right, listening in. But tlata chad shakil v'tari v'hade rabbe. One is talking back and forth with his teacher, v'hanach trei shaklu v'taru b'hade adade, and the other 2 are talking to each other. So when you have 3 students, you can't get all of their attention. This person asks me a particular law about forbidden sexual unions, and I'm giving him the answer. Why does he need to know this answer? Oi, what if he gets it wrong? Right? So I'm going to be really clear. I'm going to zero in on that student. The other 2 have each other to distract themselves. Right? And that's a problem Why? V'lo yadei mai kama rabbayu, and they won't know what their rabbi said. V'atu mimishrei yisur ba'arayot, and they may come, when they become rabbis, to permit something that is forbidden. They didn't have sufficient attention. So you can't teach arayot with 3 because of the dangers involved of 2 people getting distracted and not hearing every single thing that I'm teaching. It would be an unforgivable area to make a mistake. Look, you get basar v'chalav wrong, you throw the pot out. If you get meat and milk laws in the kitchen wrong, you can always throw the pot away. You get forbidden sexual relations wrong, what are you going to do with the kid? Right? It's an unfixable situation. All right, ihachi, oh yeah, the Talmud comes and challenges Rav Ashi. Kol haTorah name. What's unimportant in the Torah? The whole Torah should be under this law. You should only teach people like 1-on-1 or 1s and 2s. You have students not listening. Everything in Torah is important, right? All right. Arayot shane. So the answer has got to be this. Sexual prohibitions are different, right, than the rest of the Torah. De Amar Mar, because the master said, which is the name of a particular teacher, Gezel v'arayot nafshu mehamdatan u'mitava lahem. That in 2 areas of sins, theft and sexual prohibitions, people do them out of lust. They do them out of desire. You look at it and you say, I want it. Who's this guy who played for UCLA, now playing basketball in Lithuania? Right? This basketball player, one of the Ball children. All right, so he had a scholarship at UCLA this past year, and UCLA goes to China on a goodwill tour, and while he and his team are in China, he and another guy on the team go into a store and shoplift. There is no logical reason why a scholarship kid with a likely NBA career in front of him would shoplift, except he looked at it and he was like, I want that. Right? And you could do whatever background on parenting and values and morals and entitlement and anything else you want to do, right? But the bottom line is, he saw it, he wanted it, his hand went out, he grabbed it, he probably wasn't thinking, right? And he lost everything. Right? He's lucky he's not in jail in China. And for the goodwill between this White House and China, because there was a Trump trip coming soon, they wouldn't want to have to deal with this. They let him out, don't ever come back again, and UCLA canceled his scholarship and threw him out of the school. Right? People don't do this for good reasons. It's not like, stealing bread because your family's hungry, but even that's tava. Even that's desire. You're hungry. You might otherwise not thieve. You have a lust for it. Right? Even a kleptomaniac, you could say, they can't help themselves. They see it and they need it and they want it. Sex is like that. And when people do something they're not supposed to do sexually, it's because they're in the moment. And they can't help it. They're there. They don't have sufficient controls. And so this is something you need to make sure people are really, really, really getting right, because the slightest thing, people are more likely to break the law. Okay. So the Gemara says, oh really? Ihachi gezel name. So you're going to say that theft and sex are like that? So why not the rule against theft as well? Why can you teach about theft in public? You should only teach that in groups of 3. See what the Talmud's doing? It's trying to universalize logic. It's taking a Torah verse and trying to apply it to everything. Well, that doesn't work. If it doesn't apply to everything, you have to have a good reason. Otherwise, it applies to everything. So the difference is going to be arayot ben bifanav ben shelo bifanav nafesh yitzrei. In sex, your yetzer, your inclination, your desire toward it is happening all the time, even when she, he, or it is not in front of you. Right? There was some study that said, like, how often does the average American male think about sex? It was a really scary number. Right? This is something that comes into people's minds all the time. You can't help it, right? Especially in an open society with everything that's in front of you, right? So that's happening. With gezel, it's only when it's in front of you that you want to steal something. It's not like,
Hungry.
if you're hungry, that's different. So you have a tava. So that would apply. But stealing the watch from the store, it's not like you sit home all day long saying, Rolex, 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 I need a Rolex, right? But you might sit home all the time going, oh my God, I really want her. Oh my God, I really want her. You can obsess on that. Right? So that's the difference according to the Talmud. Shelo bifna v'lo nafshei yitzrei, and it drops it. And that's the end of it. So Rav Ashi has given the reason for the Mishnah with no Torah verse. And I think that's what we might have gotten up to in the last class. 15 minutes. Okay. V'lo v'maaseh b'reishit. So now we're going to go back to the Mishnah. Let's talk about creation. And this is where we're going to stay for the next several weeks. We're going to be talking about theories of creation. And now that we've been told that we can't teach them in public, we're going to teach them. That's what the Talmud does. Okay. So, you can't do Breshit with two students. Minahan emile. From where do we know these words? Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a Baraita. So this is one of those alternative teachings from the age of the Mishnah that is going to either contradict the Mishnah or complement the Mishnah, and we're going to have to try and figure that out. So the rabbis are bringing their greatest hits of this topic to bear to challenge Mishnah or understand Mishnah. Kishal nali amim rishonim. Okay, so I need someone to read a verse. Deuteronomy. Ira, can you do this for me? You can go Deuteronomy chapter 4, and I will get you the verse. I think it's verse 32. This verse is going to be, 432 is going to become the basis of the next section of Talmud.
Which chapter here?
Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 32. And the Baraita says, Ki sha'alna liyamim rishonim, inquire now as in earlier days. Read me the whole verse.
But have but to inquire about bygone ages that came before you, ever since God created man on earth, from one end of heaven to the other. Has anything as grand as this ever happened, or has its like ever been known?
Okay, that's a long sentence. Let's try and understand what's in that sentence, because the next piece of the Talmud is going to be taking that sentence as its basis. So let's go piece by piece. The beginning.
You have but to inquire about bygone ages
Pause.
that came before.
You have but to inquire. Remember, this is where ein dorshin. We're not allowed to inquire. So the Torah says you have to inquire of bygone days. Go on.
That came before you.
That came before you. Important phrase, because remember, there were four people. It's better they shouldn't be born. The person who asks, what's above, what's below, what's before, and what's after. So this just said you have to inquire of bygone days. What's before you? That's a problem. It also might be a biblical verse that's going to teach us the Mishnah. Go ahead.
Ever since God created man on earth.
Pause. Ever since God created Adam on earth. So that's going to mean the creation story of Adam Harishon, the first Adam who was created on earth. And we're talking about heaven and earth being things we maybe should not be talking about. So you can inquire from bygone days what became before you all the way back to the Adam Harishon on the earth. Go on.
From one end of heaven to the other.
Okay, that's weird. From one end of heaven to the other. Does heaven have an end? Remember, what's above and what's below, what's before and what's after? So is this telling us from one end to the other, meaning you could talk about everything, or one end to the other, those are the bookends that you can consider when you talk? Go on.
Has anything as grand as this ever happened, or has its like ever been known?
Okay, so that's the verse they're going to play with. All right? It's a rhetorical flourish. Moses is talking to the children of Israel and saying all the miracles that God has done, the redemption out of Egypt, the picking of a nation, the saving of you. Has there ever been anything like this among any people since the time of creation from one end of the earth and heaven to the other? No, you are special. Right? That's Moses' context. The rabbis are saying, well, he's talking about creation and heaven and earth and asking about things. So it applies to this Mishnah. And they're going to play with it. Okay, thank you, Ira. Kisha al nali yamim rishonim. The Baraita, the Mishnah age teaching that's not in the Mishnah, says, inquire regarding the earlier days. Yachid shoel ve'ein shnayim shoalim. And this Baraita immediately is interpreting that verse, saying, you shall ask. Sha'al na is a singular verb. Therefore, a singular person can ask about earlier days. sha'alna yachid. And if the verse says, you singular shall inquire of earlier days, that means you plural should not. And that becomes their proof text, according to this Baraita, of why you can't teach Breshit to 2. And you can to 1, because you have a verse that allows one to ask that question. But 2, Yachid shoel ve'ein shnaim shoalim. 1 can ask, 2 can't. Yachol yishal adam kodem shenivra ha'olam. But you might think that a person can ask about what came before the world. Talmud lomar, therefore the Torah came to tell you, le min hayom asher bara Elohim adam ala aretz, that you can ask from the day that God created the man on the earth. By the way, what day is that?
7.
That's the 6th day of creation.
Rested on the Sabbath.
So theoretically, that interpretation might outlaw talking about anything from the first 5 days. And all the animals. Because, Adam's the crown of creation. Right? Okay, the Baraita continues, Yachol lo yish'al Adam misheshit yimei breshit. One might think a person may not inquire from the 6 days of creation. Talmud lomar, therefore the Torah teaches, leyamim rishonim asher ayu lefanecha, regarding the early days that are before you. So it's going to take the verse and say you are allowed to ask from the days of old, that from the time the man was created, from the days that are before you, which is going to be interpreted as those days of creation before Adam are still allowed. But what's prohibited then? Anything even older than that. So anything before creation would be under the prohibition there. All right, so Yachol Yishal Adam Malamala. One might, however, wrongly think, just based on that you could ask, what's above, ma lamata, what's below, ma lifanim, ma lachor, what's above, below, and so forth. Notice the Baraita is like the Mishnah, but it has a Torah verse in the middle of it. The Mishnah just said, ein dorshin. And it's better, and you can't ask what's above, below, before, and after, it's better you weren't born. The Baraita, which comes from the same age, is using a Torah verse to learn those things. Okay? So the Baraita is from a different school that is not just teaching you the law, which the Mishnah did, it's actually expounding on Torah for that law. Why did Rabbi Yonus Hanasi, who surely had the Baraita, choose to cut the Torah verse out when he decided which words go into the Mishnah? I don't know. But we're going to see that there's an argument Shammai and Hillel coming up pretty soon in this chapter, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is from the house of Hillel. Okay? So there's multiple schools of competing thought going on, and the Baraita is doing this. Yachol Yishal. So a person might wrongly think that you can inquire what's above, below, before, and after, Talmud Lomar. Therefore the Torah teaches in the verse in question, U'lemiktsei hashamayim v'ad ktsei hashamayim, from one end of the heavens to the other end of the heaven, telling you that those are the bookends. You can't ask what's beyond one edge of the heaven or beyond the other edge of the heaven. Let me just finish the Baraita. Min lemiktsei hashamayim v'ad ktsei hashamayim ata shoel, from one end of the heaven to the other you may inquire. Ein ata shoel ma lamala ma lamata ma lifnim ma lachor, but you are not allowed to go above, beyond, before, or after those limits. Okay, questions?
Actually, this goes back to something you said 10 minutes ago, but should I do it at a future day?
No, do it. The future day we'll forget.
This has bothered me a bit. You said that men, going back to the men and women thing, you said men can't help but be distracted by women.
That was a little throwaway line.
I'm going to say something that's politically
I didn't say
incorrect.
distracted by women. I said men think about sex a lot. I didn't say anything about women.
Well, I'm gonna say
I'm not
that.
prejudicing what they're thinking about, because the Torah imagines that some of the things they might be thinking about aren't just women.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say something that's politically correct.
Go ahead.
Incorrect, anyway.
Should I mute the...
I also belong... if you want me not to say
No, say it. It's okay. We're all
I
members
also
of the...
belong to an Orthodox synagogue,
Yeah.
in addition to this. And they have a mechitza there.
Yeah.
I find women distracting, okay?
I find women gloriously distracting.
So if I'm there to pray, I'm much happier to have a mechitza there where I'm not distracted.
That's so funny, because for me, the mechitza puts them all in one place, and I can't take my eyes off it. It's like a smorgasbord.
That's kind of what you can be through. I guess that's conversely.
I guess that'd be an argument for the mechitza being in the balcony up there behind
Well,
a
that's
list.
another way to look at it.
My approach to mechitza is my tava shouldn't be their problem, right? Like, they should have access to the Torah, and if I can't handle it, maybe I'm the one who should sit somewhere else. That's my approach to it, but I understand mechitza is an honored and a valid expression of Judaism. I'm not criticizing mechitza.
Yeah.
For me, in my community, mechitza has a negative outcome, and in an Orthodox community, mechitza has a very positive outcome, right? It does. It reflects a sociology that men and women in the community largely are buying into. It's like when you read the Torah, the Shulchan Aruch says a woman can go up and count among the 7 for the Aliyot and Shabbat, right? But all 7 shouldn't be women because of the honor of the congregation. That's the phrase. And then the conservative movement says the honor of the congregation can be mitigated by the congregation. Talmud in one place says they can't give that up, and you're often running with the argument. So, but if you go into Williamsburg and you go into a Hasidic shtibel and you put a woman on the beam on Shabbos, you will be offending people. You'll be hurting people. You will be breaking and hurting their sociology, and those things are actually in play in that community. I honor that. I validate that. That's real. It's just not universal. Right? That's my approach. So, yeah, okay. Very good. No, don't be sorry. Okay, now that the Baraisa, Hashta, and we have 5 minutes, and by the way, this class is going to have 12 o'clock on time start, 1 o'clock on time hard stop, so that people who are doing this on their lunch hour don't lose their jobs and can still pay synagogue dues. Hashta denafka. Okay, so now, going back to the original editorial concern of what words is this Mishnah based on, you can say Hashta denafka le mi. Now that you have taken this out from Lemiktzei Hashamayim v'ad Ktzei Hashamayim, this verse that we've been reading from one edge of the earth, heaven to the other, Lemin hayom asher bara Elohim adam ala aretz lamali. Then why do I need the also part of the verse that says from the day God created man on earth? If you're going to say from one edge of the heavens to the other, why do I have to talk about the creation of man? I have the prohibition I need. I don't need to talk about man. Right? Well, the Gemara is going to say, okay, Kid Rabbi Elazar. I have an interpretation of this midrash that we've been doing from a rabbi known as Rabbi Elazar. And he's going to say the following. Damar Rabbi Elazar, Adam Harishon min haaretz ad larakia. Now, we're into non-scientific thinking. Okay? So just take this at face value, and let's not condescend or judge or say primitive or silly or anything else. There's a whole literature in ancient Judaism that the first created human was a giant of enormous size from one end of the earth to the other. And that being thrown out of Eden in some ways is a shrinking down and a hiding of Eden and the making of people as we know them on earth in a much smaller form. That the Adam Rishon was different. This isn't the Peshat, the clear meaning of the Torah text. This isn't mainstream, like everybody agrees on this. However, this is a known literature that is not considered at face value wrong, and it's going to be engaged very seriously right here to solve our problem. Why are you talking about the created man if you have everything from one end of the cosmos to the other already named in the verse? What does that bring to the table? What does that add? How does that help us? So Rabbi Elazar says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Adam Rishon min haaretz ad harakia. This guy was Paul Bunyan. His feet were on the earth, and his head was at the rakia. The rakia isn't the blue sky or the clouds. The rakia is the black bubble that the stars are in. They believed that we were inside a ball. And it's a black ball on one side, and it's a blue ball on the other side, and the black ball has stars stuck in it, which is why they never move, and the planets are not in that rakia. That's why they can move across the stars as we look at the background black ball. That's called the rakia. And underneath us, there's a blue ball of waters. We're separating the waters from the waters, and that was their understanding of the physical nature of the universe that we live in. So they believed that Adam was bumping his head on the stars. Okay? Everyone got the picture? Fine. Again, not everybody. It's a midrash. It's like a legend. Min hayom. Okay, so he was up to Rakia. Shneimar, and here's the proof verse. Lamin hayom asher bara Elohim Adam ala aretz. The proof verse is from the day that Adam was created on the earth, and it goes on unto the end of heaven is the end of the verse. So he was created on the earth unto the end of heaven. That's how he was created. Literal interpretation. V'chayvan sarach, and then once it means to sour or to rot, but it means he sinned, he lost his pure status. Hiniach hakadosh baruch hu yadav alav umeito. God put his hands on him like a lump of Play-Doh, and he shmushed him. Shne'emar, as it says, Achor v'kedem tzartani v'tashet alai kapecha. Later and earlier you formed me, and you placed your palm upon me. It's a verse from Psalms, and it doesn't have anything to do with Adam, but it's what they do for this midrash in this place. So I was great, and then I sinned, and you put your palm upon me in rebuke, thereby shrinking him down to human size. Another statement of Adam's size from Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav said that Adam Harishon misof ha'olam va'ad sofo haya. First man was from one end of the world to the other, not vertical, but horizontal. Shne'emar lemin hayom ad asher bara Elohim Adam ala aretz. From the day that God created Adam on earth. Lemiktzei hashamayim v'ad ktzei hashamayim, from one end of the heaven to the other, and since it's kevan shesarach v'hineach hakadosh baruch hu yadav alav u'miyuto, he had him this way from one end to the other instead of top to bottom, end to end, which would be horizontal. V'tashet alav kapecha, and he quotes the same verse from Psalms. And I put my palms on him, and I shrunk him like an accordion, and brought him in this way. Ihachi, the Gemara says, if so, kashu kra'e ahadade, the two verses contradict each other, so how can you say this verse and the Psalms verse are saying these two opposite things? You have to resolve that. Idi ve'idi chad shi'urahu, and the Gemara says, all right, I'm not going to fight over standing up and lying down, it's the exact same distance. So the distance from the earth to the rakia to bump your head is the same thing from one end of the earth to the other. That's actually
Square.
A ball.
Or a circle.
It's a diameter of a circle, of a sphere. The diameter of the sphere top to bottom is the same as side to side. What are you worrying about? And it drops it. So again, we have a savara, we have a logic conclusion that is kind of saving the verse, but not doing much. So we're going to stop there. What we've done is we've learned the prohibitions of sexual prohibitions in 3. We're into Breshit in 2. Merkavah is coming later. The next week, as we continue on 12a, 12b, 13a, is going to be talking about what was created when and the order of creation. Right? So that's where we're going to be getting into is theories of creation. Anybody who wants to email me I'm going to put it in here, Rabbi Tobin at b'nai-shalom.net is welcome to do so. People who want to go back and watch this, I believe if it's not archived on our Facebook page, which it should be, it's going to be placed onto our YouTube page. If you go to YouTube and you look up B'nai Shalom, Morris and Miriam Hammer, you'll find us there, just like you'll find us on Facebook under the same name. Thank you all for coming. A bit of a whirlwind, and we're going to do this every week, okay? Very good. Everyone wave to the camera. Everyone wave. Leslie's taking a publicity picture.